So that makes up the most. The other ones, higher education is the next one, and that's not even $250 million.
So
going up.
MnSCU is getting the,
Yep.
okay.
MnSCU, the University of Minnesota, to keep down the increase in tuition. So the state's going to supplement that so they can freeze tuition where it's at right now.
So we're just going to transfer the cost on
Right.
from the people going
Yeah,
to
because
the
the cost
taxpayer.
of the education isn't going down. They're not capping the cost. They're capping how much they're going to get from the students, and they're going to be supplement that with revenue from the state.
Well, now you talk about K-12. I mean, it's not just the general formula either that is going to be increased. They
Nope.
want special money going to early childhood, the new liberal obsession, and all-day kindergarten, the two just literal obsessions of the public school, how do you put it, elite or the public school apologists have been just harping on early childhood and all-day kindergarten. Why are they doing that? What is it with those two things that is?
Well,
why is that being pushed so much?
the studies that they are quoting say that, and I agree with the studies on the part that they're quoting. It's always in the details again as
Yeah.
to what they happen not to quote.
Yeah.
That's the issue. The earlier you get a child educated and started educating them, the better off they will be going into kindergarten and through third grade. The studies show that. I think everybody believes that. I think that's a fact.
So on the 300-page study, they pull that sentence out, right?
Well, there's a few in there. What happens is not all of them, but their studies have been done, is to say, well, let's not just stop at third grade. Let's look and see where those people are in middle school or junior high, depending on what system you have, and then follow them into high school. The studies that I have seen and have been quoted is that starting in fourth grade, fifth grade, and sixth grade, what was gained is started to be lost. Excuse me. I was at the Swarm game last night and lost my voice. Side note. And by, I think, high school, it's almost a wash. You cannot tell the difference between the students that had early childhood education in a formal education or had gone all-day kindergarten, that had been erased.
So in other words, there is not a long-term.
Yes. It's a short-term, but the problem is maybe we need to reform the rest of the education system past third grade to actually make that stick, because I think that's the problem, is they've concentrated all their efforts on either K3 or E3 now, and then something happens once they get into fourth, fifth, sixth, junior high, middle school, and high school, that they haven't figured out how to mitigate what they're teaching.
So why not, instead of throwing more money at all-day kindergarten, aren't we looking at fourth, fifth, and sixth grade and saying, what the hell's going on?
Because that would be too hard to do, probably, because that's a bigger fish that needs to be done, rather than they can pull this thing out that everybody agrees on, because everybody doesn't agree on that remaining piece.
Right. And yeah, here's the thing too. This is one thing that I'm really concerned about. If you fund all-day kindergarten, or there's even talk of making it a mandate.
Yeah, because again, in his budget, it's only voluntary all-day kindergarten.
What Dayton, I think, wants is to have every district have an option for people to have all-day kindergarten.
Right.
Same thing with early childhood. But there are those who want it mandated.
Right. Oh, yes.
Now,
and then again, the step transaction. Once you get something started, it's much easier to append it.
Yeah. But I mean, my worry is long-term, that's going to be an unfunded mandate, and the cost of that will be on local taxpayers. It'll be an excuse for a referendum. Am I far off on that?
I don't think so, no, because what he is gaining is the early childhood, according to the information I have, is $44 million pot. And again, these are pots of money.
Now, that's for the next 2 years.
2 years. So half of that would be every school year, and $40 million for all-day kindergarten, so $20 million, and these are pots. So it's just like the special education, and that's another area that they want to increase, is they want to fund more special education. What happens is they put a big pot of money out there, and the districts come in after the fact and say, this is how much we spent, and they add all the districts together, and that ratio of how big the pot is to the total is how much they get. They don't get 100%, so first in, first out.
Right.
So a great example would be is if we had $100 million of expenses and only $80 million in the pot, 80% of your expenses would be covered. But you still spent $100 million.
Right.
So there's a $20 million bucket out there that's not funded.
And then the locals will sit there and blame the state for not
Correct.
funding it.
Because they're not funding it to the full extent, even though they know that they're not going to get 100% of this.
But see, now this is where, we really need some local governments to do some, why, one of my big complaints about local governments, and they do this at every level, is they figure out what they want to spend, then they figure out how they're going to get it.
Right.
Now, you and I would never do that in our private. I mean, if I said to my boss, I'm going to spend $4,000 this month, and I turned it into my boss and said, there, you got to fund it 100%. My boss is going to tell me to go fly a kite. Why?
You cleaned that up quite nicely. I know your boss, so.
Yeah, but I mean, why is it with government we work 100% the opposite of that?
Because unfortunately, most of the people in government have never run a business.
Yeah.
I'm guessing they
Worked
probably
in
don't
the
run.
private sector even?
Probably don't run their budgets very well. I'm guessing they're maxed out their credit cards and wondering why they might get cut off. And it's always been done this way.
Right.
So it's the whole thing is government's always been run this way, and there's no way to change it. Because we've always done it this way, there's no way to change. And the public, you have not required them to change, because remember, we the people still are in charge, I think.
Yeah.
I'm wavering on that.
Here's another thing, too, that's very significant that's missing from this. If you look at House File 1, the first thing that the new legislature put in as a bill, it was to pay back the school shift. This, remember the school shift that happened under Pawlenty the last 2 years of his administration? This punts the shift. How often have we heard the governor and his friends say, that's irresponsible, we have to pay that back, we need to pay that back right away? This punts that all the way to the, if I understand it right, to the 16-17 biennium, which is 2 bienniums, well, 2 bienniums from right now, one more from the one that we're planning.
Proposing,
So we are, in a sense, the whatever the money is that we owe school
It's about
districts.
$1.1 billion.
Yeah,
because again, they paid part of it back, which was required. Once the November forecast came out, they had to pay back. That was the first bucket to be paid back. So they paid back, I think, about a half of it. So I think half of it's left, half of it they paid back to get to the 90-10 split. And they're always going to be a split. They never pay them 100% in the fiscal. They pay them 90. The original rules was 90-10. So in the biennium, they'll pay them 90. The next biennium, they'll pay them the other 10%.
So that's nothing new necessarily. That happens every time. But the money that we held back previously is not dealt with in the governor's proposed budget.
Right. Half of what the cut. I think they're halfway back. I think they went to a 64. 36, and I think they brought that back up to 70-something. So half of that gap has been paid up and already paid back by the November forecast because it was required. That was part of the budget thing. That was the first thing. If they expanded beyond what collected more money than they expected, that would go to pay back. But only half of it. So I think what was done was they would only pay back half of that was statutorily required.
I just wonder if that's a big thing that a lot of the DFLers ran on is they were going to do that first, and the governor doesn't even deal with it.
He doesn't deal with it, yeah. So I think he may have some trouble because, again, if you read the news reports, the legislature was lukewarm with his proposal. Yeah, not seeing the details again. We must see, this is just based on what it is we're approval, but we'll hold off any
I saw a
determination as to exactly what we like and what we don't like for a little further.
I'll say this. Some people liked the general concepts but distanced themselves from
specifics.
Look, we only have a short time left, but I think we do need a tax reform in this state. And I think if we were to broaden the sales tax base and maybe get rid of the income tax, that might be an interesting converation to have. Right. But what we're doing is we're opening up revenue sources that aren't going to stay at 5.5%.
You're talking revenue neutral, in other words, rather than saying it's revenue neutral?
More efficient way to collect taxes, maybe. All right. Well, Well, that's a wrap for another show.
Yeah.
We'll keep on this and let you know what's going on. Ron, as always, Numbers Guy, thank you very much.
Yep. Thank you, Andrew.
Thank you, the audience, for watching. Come back next week. We'll have some more fun stuff.